Colin and I are currently down in Florida visiting my parents. Earlier this week, we decided to take a couple of their kayaks out for a paddle. They've got a regular, just molded plastic sea kayak, but they also have this cool Hobie kayak that you can pedal instead of paddle. It has these fins that move like penguin flippers under the water, and those attach to pedals, and so you kind of ride a bike to propel you forward rather than paddling. I love this kayak. I think that it's one of the really fun things to do when we come to visit. It's one of my favorite ways to go out on the water here. But unfortunately, one of the pedals of this kayak is broken right now. So when Colin and I took the kayaks out earlier this week, we were both just paddling them regularly. But I'm used to pedaling the Hobie. And so when we took it out, I couldn't get the seat adjusted quite right, and it kept pulling to the left, and the width of the boat that affects its balance and its steerability, it didn't seem quite as perfect as it usually does. Of course, there was nothing wrong with the kayak. It's a kayak. And there's nothing wrong with me. I'm an experienced kayaker. But because I'm used to doing it one way, and now I had to do it another way, it just didn't seem right. On the paddle home, Colin and I switched boats. Maybe it's his wingspan compared to mine. Maybe it's that he's got a different history with kayaks because he's used to whitewater and river boats rather than sit on tops in a bayou. But we laughed when we got home because I said this new to me boat was way easier to paddle. And it turns out that he'd been knocking his knees in it the whole time he was in it. If we had just switched earlier on, if we had adapted to the situation in which we were in, it might have been better for both of us. Sometimes we're put in these situations where we have to adapt, where something that feels normal or right or even good isn't an option anymore, and so we have to adjust. But in these times of upset or change or disaster or pandemic even, we have the opportunity that we might not have otherwise taken to reevaluate what we've come to call normal, or even best. We have the opportunity to wonder what these things might look like just for now in this season, or if they might be even better if they come to encounter lasting change. Certainly the ways that we've been able to gather as a church over the last few months is one of these things. I'm sure that we all both mourn for the loss of the opportunity to gather for in-person worship. We hope for the days when we can safely do that again together. We have an opportunity, for the time being at least, to consider what the best ways of continuing to gather and to worship together are, for now. Rather than fight a kayak that feels like it's continually pulling to the left or zigzagging and feeling like it shouldn't, why not consider just switching boats? Perhaps we've got an opportunity now as a church to consider not how we make things like they were, or what we need to do to get back to things being normal-ish, but rather we might consider what resources and options we have for making the best of the current moment. Like, let's consider who we gather with. Right now, it's reasonable to think that when we come back together again at St. Andrews, we'll all be wearing face coverings and we'll be staying at least 6 feet apart from one another. Hugging or shaking hands will not be encouraged, and you'll probably be asked to go straight from your car to your assigned pew before worship and then straight back out again. That's not really what we're looking for. That doesn't resemble the worship experience that we're missing. And so I wonder how instead, now, we might gather for worship with those with whom we're already gathering. Family, maybe, immediate, or extended, or adopted. We might be gathering with friends, or just a few neighbors. And so I wonder, where around your home or in your neighborhood might become your church? Believing in and maybe even deeply missing the way that God is made present in our lives through our sacramental Eucharistic worship might we right now lean more deeply into the ways that God is made present to us through Scripture? Which Psalms might you begin to read together to proclaim God's provision as you get ready for a family barbecue? Which of our sacred stories that are so full of stories of water might be made even more meaningful when you read and reflect on them from your boat or from Masonboro or from the beach? Do you think a litany that confesses the generational injustice that we've been a part of might feel different if we were confessing with generations of our own family, gathering digitally now, maybe even more than they were when they were able to gather in person? Do you think that time spent remembering biblical stories of hospitality might sound different on your front porch, with your neighbors safely 6 feet distant perhaps, but closer than they've been lately? Let me know what your plans are, or what your hurts are right now, or what your hopes are right now, and maybe we can think together what liturgy looks like in that moment, what sacramental scripture reading sounds like in that moment, how our worship continues. Because it's important for us to remember that simply because we aren't gathering in the same building every weekend, church continues, community continues, worship continues. Our worship, our call, is exactly the same as it's always been. Today's passage from Matthew's Gospel closes the 10th chapter of the Gospel. In this chapter, Matthew's been telling of how Jesus is sending out the disciples. He's inviting them to be a part of God's ongoing mission, inviting them to participate in the movement that is bringing to light God's deep love for all people. And so Jesus tells the disciples to go out and to cure the sick and raise the dead, to cleanse the lepers and cast out demons. The mission of the church hasn't changed. We're still being sent out. Last fall, Colin and I hosted a small group where we read the book Missional Essentials together. We talked about what it means to be sent. And we were reminded that the church exists because of God's already ongoing mission. A deep love for all, not the other way around. God's mission wasn't created by the church, but the church can be swept up in the Missio Dei, the mission of God. Because this mission is God's mission, it's God's already ongoing mission, we can trust that God has been and still is and will continue to be at work in and amongst and in spite of us. And so our mission as a church, as we're being sent out, is not necessarily one of conversion or persuasion, but rather it's a mission of invitation and assurance. God's love is already wherever we are, and it will already be present wherever we might go. We might participate in God's mission by curing the sick and raising the dead and cleansing the lepers and casting out demons. We might continue to participate in God's mission by healing things that hurt or diminish people's fullness of life. We might challenge death-dealing systems. We might work towards the full social restoration of those who have been cast out and marginalized. We might set free those who are being held in bondage by all sorts of evils. The church's mission is the same. Even as we have this opportunity to reconsider what it looks like to continue that mission, while some of the things that we've come to rely on as normal are temporarily out of commission. And so I wonder, where are you being sent? To whom are you being sent right now? Where might you encounter God's already ongoing mission and be able to embody it in the spaces that you're already going, the spaces that you're brushing up against right now? Because even in the midst of pandemic, we're still being sent. Maybe especially in the midst of pandemic, we're being sent to cure the sick, those who are sick of being made less than, those who are sick of the systems that have counted them as only part of a human, those whose health is being diminished by lack of access to care, to resources, to affordable health care, to drinking water. Maybe you're being sent to raise the dead, or at least raise the alarm and put an end to the death-dealing systems and norms and customs that we encounter, to call out death and brokenness where it has taken root, and work and move and vote to end the gun violence around our nation and our very own community, brutal policing with origins in slave enforcement, domestic abuse of partners or children, ever present perhaps now, especially with people sheltering in place, the death-dealing ways that we abuse our fragile planet. Perhaps it's you that's been sent to cleanse the lepers, to heal the societal rifts that we've entrenched ourselves in, bringing social restoration to those that we've labeled unclean or weird or different or queer. Perhaps it's you who will embrace and enfold these outcasted persons. You too are beloved, exactly how God made you to be. Or maybe it's you who's been sent to cast out demons, setting people, setting society free from whatever it is that holds us in bondage. Maybe it's you that will speak God's holy name, God's life-giving truth over situations where demonic brokenness holds tight, casting out, loosing the bonds we ever tighten on greed and retributive justice and nationalism and partisanship and pride. Because the mission of the church remains the same. We are the church together. Whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones, Jesus says, well, may the life-giving water which Jesus has offered us pour out abundantly through us, emerging as a cup of cold water to those who are thirsty. Will you come and follow me if I but call your name? Will you go where you don't know and never be the same? Will you let my love be shown? Will you let my name be known? Will you let my life be grown in you, and you in me?